Good afternoon. My name is John Lynch. I'm a retired Lutheran pastor. Oh, excuse me. We stand 6 feet apart. That's what my T-shirt says. But I'm not going to wear a mask for this Bible study. We're going to study in this for 4 weeks in Lent until March 17th. Every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, we're going to study the book of Genesis, the beginning of the Bible. And as you know, the Bible begins with, in the beginning, God. You could say that's the whole Bible. Just meditate on that for a while. Whatever beginning you're into, God is there. That's what, say, oh, how about, what was it, the Big Bang Theory that began the world? Or was it a collision of asteroids, or I don't know what? It doesn't make any difference. The Bible is not addressing that kind of stuff. This is a book about faith, not about astronomy or anything like that. So, in the beginning, God. And that has to do with every beginning that we are into. Last year, I was standing in front of a crowd at this time of year in LCR, and I was talking to live people in a live setting. I feel like a TV anchor with this thing, and I've never done this before, so it's a brand new beginning for me. But if I keep remembering how the Bible begins, in the beginning, God, then I don't have to worry. I know God will bring me through this, and he'll bring all of us through this, and we will get the word, hopefully, the message that's running forth from the mouth of God in the word of God. In the beginning, God. I didn't invent this insight myself. When I was in a very important beginning in my life, I was leaving the Roman Catholic Church, where I'd been a priest for 20 years, back in I started in 1977, and I had to jump through hoops from the Lutheran bishop for 5 years, and he finally approved me for ordination in 1982. But somebody told me, become a nuisance at the Synod House. In Maryland, the bishop's office was a house, a small house. He had a room for his office, and so it was called the Synod House. So I would be up there as often as I could. I lived in Annapolis, and I would just make myself known, whether he liked me or not. I was there. But I discovered they had cassette tapes. Does anybody remember cassette tapes? They were the big thing back then. You could plug them in your car radio. You could get cassette players all over the place. And they had sermons by famous Protestant preachers. And one of them was a man named Carlisle Marney. He was a Baptist, and he was pastor of one of the big prestigious Baptist church in Charlotte, North Carolina, just up the road from here. And somebody just came in, I think.
Yep.
Okay, we got to let you in. Okay, admit. There. Okay. Hi. Welcome to the Bible study. Oh, I know who this is. Hey, I can see you guys. Hi. I don't.
Their audio is connecting.
Oh, okay. Your audio is not connecting quite yet, but it will be here. So, but anyway, I was up listening to this cassette tape by Dr. Carlisle Marney, and he gave me this. He said, he was a Southerner, so I can't imitate his voice, but he said, the most important words in the Bible are the first 4 words of Genesis. In the beginning, God. No matter what beginning you're going through, it doesn't make any difference. Is this guy on? Oh, okay, good. Okay. So, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, we go through so many beginnings in life, and they're all a challenge. When my wife and I were first married, we studied German for a while, and we learned that a phrase called Jeder Anfang ist schwer. Every beginning is difficult. After we finished 1 year of German, my wife said, let's study something easy next year, like brain surgery, because this language is so, to me anyway, complicated and difficult. But anyway, I also went to school, in high school, with a guy whose name was Phil Anfang. I never knew what his name meant. Beginning. So I lost my train of thought there. But I thought, I'm in a beginning myself, trying to become a Lutheran pastor. That was a huge change for me. But the Lord brought me through it. And the more I was up there at that synod house, the more the bishop saw me. What is that?
His fingers over the screen.
What are you doing touching that screen with your finger? All I can see is your finger. But I happen to know a couple here in town who come to our church, and they're going to have a grandbaby next month. That's a beginning. It's a beginning for them. They're watching. And for you, and it's a beginning for your whole family, and it's a beginning for the baby, of course. The best way to enter all that, don't worry about, is it this way? Is the baby going to be healthy? Is he going to be this way? In the beginning, every beginning, God is there. That's the first message of the Bible. And I have several Bibles here, and I want to proceed with one that I particularly like. It's the Holman, let me see what it's called, hold on. The Holman Christian Standard Bible. This is put out pretty much by the professors at the University of Dallas, which is a really conservative Christian, Southern Christian seminary, but they're really good with Bible words, and I like their translation. I have a couple of others here too. The King James is still, I think, my favorite, because the people who did that they were preachers, number one, and they were scholars. And King James appointed them to in small groups to translate the Bible. And so they did, but they were attuned to people who couldn't read or write back in the early 1600s. And so they had to make the language alive and sharp, and the English language has a lot of words like that. So that's why I think it has lasted so long. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths, and this is key. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. What's going on here is the Spirit of God. This is the Holy Spirit, we would say today, or as we used to say, the Holy Ghost. The Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. The Bible doesn't teach creation from nothing. That's an intellectual concept. It comes from the Greeks. The Bible is not about intellectual concepts. It's about feelings, and it's about faith, and it's about picturing how God works among us. The earth was formless. Let me get the King James Bible here, because I like the way they translate this. Oh, this isn't it. I forgot it. Well, this is close enough. This is the Revised Standard. And let me see how they translate this. The earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. While a wind from God, or the Spirit of God. Let's make it the Spirit of God. That's what the Bible is teaching, isn't it? Wind swept over the face of the waters. Now, lots of times we think the Holy Spirit comes to calm us down and to make us cool, not upset by anything. That's not what's happening here. The first time we read about the Holy Spirit, you know what he's doing? He's stirring up the waters. He's like Job. You remember Job? The first Bible study that I taught at LCR. It was in the church, can you imagine, squeezed in between the end of the 8:30 service and the beginning of choir practice for the 10:30. So we had about 25 minutes. And anyway, Job complains and complains for 37 chapters in there. His wife gets so fed up with him, she said, Job, curse God and die. Support spouse. And curse God and die. But he doesn't do that. You know what he says, of course, is the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He gets this in the beginning God message. But in the 38th chapter of Job, God finally speaks to Job, and how does he come to Job? Like a gentle breeze blowing over? There's a big pond out here, blowing over the pond? No. He comes to Job in a whirlwind. That would be a tornado or a cyclone or something, a hurricane or something like that, to get his attention. Where were you when I set the foundations of the world and all that? Job finally has to say, I wasn't there, Lord. But don't try to figure me out. I'm doing this for your own good. And I think every beginning we go through, no matter how difficult it is always for our own good. So the Spirit of God is, I'm going to use this one for a minute. This is the Revised Standard. Swept over the face of the waters. That's better. I think you could say, stirred up the face of the waters. And God said, this is the whole key to the first chapter of Genesis. God talks and it happens. His word makes it happen. And Isaiah 55 is my favorite Bible verse. The word of God runs forth from the mouth of God and accomplishes the purpose for which it was sent and prospers in the thing to which it was sent. So if God sends his word to me or to you, it's going to accomplish its purpose, whatever it is, and it's going to prosper in us. Prosperity, sometimes in the Jewish language, the word shalom, which is how Jewish people greet each other. Normally it means peace. It also means prosperity. So anyway, and God said, let there be light. It was all darkness up to now, and there was light. That's all you need is the word of God to bring about what you need, what's needed. And God saw that the light was good. Notice that everything in the Bible that God creates in chapter 1 here is good, and it was good, and it was good. He didn't make evil things. Even the sea monsters are called good in this account of Genesis. And God separated the light from the darkness. The darkness was already there, right? That's when God created the heavens and the earth, they were dark, and God brought them light. And I think that happens with us too. Sometimes in our darkest moments, that's when the Spirit of God comes to stir us up. Luther said one time that he was always wrestling with ideas and stuff like that. Okay. Thank you, I'm good. Thank you. Okay. Nathan helped me set this thing up. So anyway, he's leaving, so I'm on my own if this thing crashes. See you next week. So, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. Now, as we all know, in the first chapter of Genesis, the Bible presents the world, everything is created in days. Days are not 24-hour units in the Bible. Time in the Bible is as flexible as you want it to be. I think it's in the first or second epistle to St. Peter. One day, 1,000 of your years is as one day with the Lord. So the reason it's put into 7 days is because there are 2 accounts of creation in the book of Genesis. One in chapter 1, which we're going through right now, and one in chapter 2. They're very different because they came from different traditions in Israel. The second one is the oldest one, in fact. And this was written pretty recent in terms of when people were writing the Old Testament. This was done by priests who wanted everything orderly. That was their role in Israel. They all came from the tribe of Levi. Because the tribe of Levi, when the land was divided, they didn't get any land. Every other tribe was supposed to set aside a patch of land for the Levites to farm, but their main job was to take care of the worship in the temple and preserve the traditions and study the traditions. And so they liked everything to be in good order. And to promote the Sabbath day, they had to make sure that the Jewish people honored the Sabbath day. And this whole first chapter of Genesis leads up to the creation of the Sabbath. He creates every other day, and he blesses the seventh day. That's the Sabbath. So that's the first day. I don't know why they divided it up exactly as making this the first day, but it's the beginning. And God said that let there be a dome in the midst of the waters and let it separate the waters from the waters. Back then they thought of the sky as an inverted copper bowl that God hammered out, and because there was water on the earth, under the earth, seeping up in rivers and streams and springs and things, and there was water above the earth and rain and snow. Hey, are you glad you're in Florida today with snow everywhere north of us? So this dome is the sky. Let it separate the waters. The way they looked at it was there were gates in the dome, and when God wanted rain to come, he'd open the gates and it would come down. And the sun and the moon, all of the neighboring nations around Israel who worshiped the sun and the moon as gods and goddesses. And in the biblical account, they're created, of course, by God, and they're hung like on hooks up on that dome that we call the sky. So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so, because whatever God did was so, and it was good. God called the dome the sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. Now, every day, I don't know why they had to have God create some stuff one day and one day the other, but these priestly writers who put this account of creation did it this way. Let the waters under the sky be gathered in together in one place, and let dry land appear. I guess up to now it's just a swamp or something like that. And so God had to call the dry land earth, and the waters that gathered he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. And then now he's going to start creating things that are useful for human beings. Well, he's not going to create human beings until the sixth day in this way of looking at it. Then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit. And so it was. So up right now, everybody's a vegetarian because there's nothing else to eat, right? Plants yielding seed of every kind of trees. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. Here come the sun and the moon. God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. It all goes back to God, beginning. Now he's going to begin the sun and the moon and all that. So, and let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, and it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. That's the moon, of course, and the stars. He set them in the dome. He's working on this inverted copper bowl that he put up there, see? He set them in the dome to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day and over the night. God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning. Now we're at the fourth day. The day, it's sort of arbitrary why they put everything at different days, because they're leading up to the seventh day. They want to make sure that right from the get-go, right from the beginning, the Jewish people who are reading, you're not reading this, they're hearing it, because when this was written down, people were not reading and writing a whole lot of things. There were scribes. If you had to make a commercial transaction, you hired a scribe to do it for you. I have a live-in caregiver now. I just turned 86, by the way. You can tell by my teeth. This one cracked the other day. I went to the dentist. He said, "What do you want me to do about it?" 3 others had already cracked, and he made them look pretty and all that kind of stuff. I said, "I don't want you to do anything with this one." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, what do you think?" Well, he said, "If you were 18 years old, I'd say I should fix it for you. But I can tell you, if I make this tooth look the way it was before, it was knocked out by a lower canine teeth. They don't break." He said, "But this thing will be knocked out in about a week. If you want to pay me to do something like that, I can guarantee you it'll be gone maybe 2 weeks. That's it." I think it's a smart move. I'm not going to do anything. So he didn't. So now I've got a hole in my face. So on the 5th day, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth. And God created the great sea monsters. Half of those sea monsters were considered by other peoples around Israel as evil gods and goddesses. And so they worshiped them and paid homage to them. One of them was called Rahab, I think, and every kind. And God saw that it was good. Everything he made, even Leviathan, Rahab, the monsters. The Israelites were desert people. They didn't have a whole lot of experience with sea creatures, but they knew about them. And there was evening, be fruitful, and saying to them, "Blessed all the creatures in the sea and the air, fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." That was the beginning of the National Audubon Society. Not exactly, but the birds the birds get a special mention in here. And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. I'm a bird watcher. I started being a bird watcher when I was 10 years old. My father, that was in 1945. So after the war, that means the Second World War. After the war, the National Audubon Society wanted to get small Audubon societies in every small town in America. So I grew up in a town of about 15,000 people at the end of the war, 12 to 15. And my dad, who was the manager of the local power company, set up an Audubon Society up. And I met some of the great Audubon people. I used to sell tickets to let people in the college auditorium. We had a teacher's college in my town. In the college auditorium, and I met people. If you're into birds, you know that a man named Roger Torrey Peterson wrote a bird book that everybody still uses. I met him when I was 10 or 12 years old. And then another guy came through. His name was Alan Cruikshank. You go over to Rock Ledge, there's a small birds, it's about 180 acres, I think. There's a bird sanctuary, animal and bird sanctuary called the Helen and Ellen Cruikshank Sanctuary. And they have a bird in there that you can hardly see anyplace else around here called the Florida Scrub Jay. And I've been over there once, and we saw the scrub jays. They're almost tame. It's like walking in the Garden of Eden. Alan Cruikshank was a big shot with the National Audubon Society. He came from Rock Ledge, and he is the man responsible for establishing the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge all around the Kennedy Center. He wanted to make sure that they didn't build condos right up to space, pad 39A. If you've ever been up there, you can see wild boar running around all over the place. But he's the one responsible for that. So anyway, the birds get a priority over humans in here, and so do the sea monsters. Now, and on this, let's see, that was the 5th day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things The creeping things are going to come into the other story of creation, the snake. And creeping things and wild animals of the earth. And it was so. And God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, the cattle, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. Look at this. And God saw that it was good. How come the snake tempts Eve and Adam in the next chapter? The people, the final people who put the Bible together, it's a collection of stories. And some of the stories are going to contradict each other. Like, how can a snake who's tempting and pushing God away, and how can he be good? They don't bother with inconsistencies like that. It's like, how many families, do we say, well, if we have family unity, come on. There are as many different opinions on anything as there are people in the family. That's sort of the way the Bible was put together. Then, here we go. That was fifth day. So look at this. Now we come, let us make humankind, Adam. We always thought growing up that Adam meant a male of the human species. Adam, in Hebrew, Adam, means humankind. It means humanity. I don't want to get, it's all man in our language. But Adam, and now he's not made from the dirt of the earth. That's in the other creation story, chapter 2. Here, let us make humankind in our image, according to our image and our likeness. And let them, because he's created male and female right from the get-go in this particular story, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and even over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Now listen to this. This is really important. These priests who put together this, they want to make sure that this gets across to the Jewish people who are reading this. And so God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them right from the get-go. There's nothing about woman being pulled from the rib of the man, and that's in the other creation story. They both have the same point, that men and women are created equal in the sight of God. It's really important, chapter 1, verse 27. So God created humankind in the image of God, male and female, he created them. There's something about men and women living together and working together that is the image of God, the image and likeness of God. Even in the Bible, marriage is described as two in one flesh. The word for flesh in Hebrew sounds like this, basar. It's a noun and it means flesh, this stuff, muscles and skin and all that. But as a verb, it means to announce or proclaim something. And so I think marriage means that two people come together and their personalities are so entwined that they announce something to the world. And the purpose of it is to announce the glory of God, to announce the goodness of God, to announce that in our lives as couples, every beginning we go through, God is there. In the beginning, God. That's the message of chapter 1, really. So, and he blessed them. Nothing else has been blessed yet of creation. He blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. This was given to all the cattle and everything else. That's not particular to us. And fill the earth and subdue it. That doesn't mean dominate over it. It means take care of it. This is a setting up of a stewardship of the goods and the creatures of the earth. That's what we're called to do. That's what these priests who put together this first chapter of Genesis, that's what they wanted to do. Get that across. And have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Dominion over meaning take care of. We're getting much more ecologically sensitive. Well, that's right here in the beginning of the Bible. This doesn't mean subdue and exercise dominion over it until it's gone, like the way in the American West. The buffalo, of course, were absolutely critical for the survival of Native Americans, especially, I think, the Dakota. Where I grew up in southern Minnesota, that was Dakota or Sioux territory. And my hometown was called Mankato, which is an anglicized version of a Sioux, I should say a Dakota word, Makato, which means blue earth. There was an explorer, that was part of the Louisiana Territory a long time ago. It was west of the Mississippi. And there was a French explorer, Le Sueur. Have you ever seen Le Sueur peas in the grocery store, the little tiny ones? Well, Le Sueur, Minnesota is the town where the Jolly Green Giant began. And he was an explorer in that part of the Louisiana Territory. And he found blue clay along a river not far from my hometown, Mankato. And he sent it to the King of France. He said, I've discovered copper up in the Louisiana Territory. The king brought his chemists in, and they said, send a note back to Pierre Le Sueur. It's not copper, it's blue clay. So it's of useless to us. It wasn't useless to the Dakota because they use it for ceremonial paints, war paint also. So we got into southern Minnesota and blue earth from here, but here we are. God blessed them and said to them, and have dominion over everything. God said, see, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth and every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, that's the Spirit of the Lord. Sometimes I think we live by artificial respiration. When everybody waits for the baby to cry, that means he's got air inside of him to breathe out. Where did that air come from? I believe that God starts giving us artificial respiration the moment we are born. And if he didn't keep blowing into us every second or 30 seconds of every day, we die. So I think we're really dependent. That's how much he loves us. He's giving each one of us artificial respiration, because without it, we're corpses all over the earth. So everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. They emphasize this over and over and over again, these priests who wrote the first chapter of Genesis. Everything God made is good, so treat it that way. You're good, every other person is good. We say, there's some evil people out there, they're terrible. And sometimes we appreciate God most when we are feeling like the earth was when God stirred it up and the breath of the Lord came in and stirred up the waters. I started to tell this story, and I think I forgot to tell it. But anyway, sometimes we have to get really down, down, down before we feel the breath of the Lord reviving us and bringing us to life again, a new beginning. Most of you know my wife died a year ago, December of 2019. And last year at this time, her funeral was not until January of 2020. And 2 days after that, I started the Bible study. I could hardly speak. People were going like this, and I thought they were raising their hands, and they were saying, Pastor, speak up. I never had people ever tell that me, but I couldn't get my voice. Nothing was happening. I'm thinking now, why did I do that right away? Instead of grieving, I just stayed busy, busy, busy. And now I'm feeling the grief more now than I did right after she died, because I was keeping busy, busy, busy. That's the American way. And sometimes don't just sit there, do something. I think sometimes it's better for me, don't just do something, sit there and let the Spirit of God breathe into you and see what the Spirit has to say to you today. Every morning when we wake up, I live in a condominium. There's 112 units in this condominium, and we're all fairly ancient. I call this place God's waiting room. Next. My neighbors don't like that. I'm saying, hey, I'm telling the truth, that's all. God's waiting room. Maybe you live in one of those condos too. There's plenty of them around here. No. Anyway, I started to tell about Luther. When I lived in France, I lived over there for 4 years, and it changed my whole life around. My wife said, "You never left." She said, "I have to put up with it, but yeah, you never left." So anyhow, there was a French philosopher over there. He was actually a baptized Catholic, but he claimed he was an atheist. So our theology of baptized is once you're baptized, you're God's, whether you believe it or not. It's not important. God believes in you, and he's got you. One of the most important parts of our baptism ritual is not when we pour the water, but afterwards we trace the sign of the cross on the person's head, baby or adult. For me, it would be John, child of God. You are marked with the cross of Christ and sealed with his Spirit forever, forever. That's the beginning of our lives as Christians. I love that hymn we used to sing at the 5 o'clock service at LCR. I'm not hanging on to Jesus. He's hanging on to me. I think it's a country and western song. I love that hymn. So anyway, let me a word on LCR too. I think that I went through a second loss last year in September when Pastor Jay announced he was leaving. I didn't see that coming. And I thought, geez, I got enough loss for 1 year, Lord. My wife just died, and now Pastor Jay's leaving. So I'm still feeling that loss too, I must admit. And it's all grief related. But grief, of course, takes you down into the depths of feelings. You feel abandoned. You feel, why did they leave me, and this kind of stuff? I'm alone. We're not alone. They're still watching over us, and they're closer to us probably than they were when they were here on earth. But it's the feeling you get, abandonment. It's the feeling Jesus had on the cross, I think. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And but that's Psalm 22. That's how that begins, right before the 23rd Psalm. It's worth looking at. It's interesting. They're side by side. But 22 begins like that. But later on in that Psalm, he knows that the Lord is with him, and he gets, there's hope. He's never without hope when he's even feeling abandoned. He's never without hope. And I really think, oh, okay. Hi. Somebody just came in. I thought, I know the door is open. Come on in. I thought it was the angel calling me home. Anyway, I lost my train of, oh yeah. This philosopher, his name was Jean Paul Sartre. He had two sayings that I remember from him. One was, hell is other people. Sometimes I can agree with that rather than some fiery pit that we're going to go to if we don't live up to what God expects of us. How about Jesus saying on the cross, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. In other words, human beings can be real devils to each other, terrible, but they don't know what they're doing, Father. Forgive them. And this is, I think, the final judgment on everybody in the human race. Hitler, Stalin, whoever you talk about, it's forgiveness. God doesn't hold this stuff against us. We do that, but God doesn't. So, and the other phrase he had, besides hell is other people, was true life begins, notice that word begin, true life begins on the other side of despair. It's like for Jesus, resurrection life began after he went through the cross. Before the cross, he experienced the Garden of Gethsemane. Let this pass from me. I think when we're in grief, we can get to that, get me out of this, Lord, because I'm really feeling abandoned. And he will, because there's always hope with God. And his Spirit was put upon us when we were baptized, forever, forever. And Luther had the same experience. He used to wrestle in his head all the time about how God could give us all these 10 commandments and we can't keep them. We can't live up to them by our own reason and strength. We just don't have the capacity to keep the commandments. And then he said, when he got down there, he said, trying to think this out on my own just drove me to the very brink of despair. And it was only when I was there that I realized how close I was to the grace of God. And I think when we get into times of deep grief or deep feelings of abandonment or anger or whatever, that's when we're closest to God. He's right there with us. It's the beginning of something new. In the beginning, God, he's always right there. So anyway, back to everything that has the breath of life. Breath of life, I think this is how God keeps us going. People say, people always ask me. I rode down in the elevator this morning with 2 other people who are waiting for God in their condo above me. And they said, we're going to get our second COVID vaccine shot. Oh, good. I said, where are you getting it? Publix, right down here, right down the street. Here in Cocoa Beach, the south one, new one. I said, how did you get that? I said, our neighbors tried desperately they had to go to Kissimmee to get their shots. And so, we just signed up for it. Are you getting yours? Have you gotten yours yet? I said, no. And she says to me, because women pick up on what you're really talking about, are you going to get the shots? I said, no, I'm not. I said, I had a horrible negative reaction to vaccine shots a few years ago. They gave me a flu shot and right after it, a pneumonia shot. And I said, I'm not getting this kind of stuff in here anymore. I said, no, I'm not. And I saw in the paper today, 1/3 of Americans say they don't want to get it. So go figure. But my truth is, if God wants me to get COVID, I'll get it. If he doesn't, I won't get it. I've been tested about 3 times last year. I felt like I was in compromising situations. I wasn't wearing my mask or something when I should have. There's only a machine in front of me right now, so I'm not too worried. But anyway, I got tested 3 times up the street, a walk-in clinic, negative every time. First time I went in there, they said, what are your symptoms? I said, I'm 85 years old. Okay, come on in. That's all I had to say. So anyway, and it was so. I've given them every green plant for food. I think maybe those priests were vegetarians. They don't seem to include anything about eating meat in here. God saw everything that he had made. This is chapter 1, verse 31. And indeed, it was very good. They emphasize this all the time. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. Now comes the point of why it's a 7-day thing. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it, God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. That's the purpose of the 7th day. Only 2 of all the creation, only humankind, made male and female, are blessed. The others don't get the blessing. They get the creation, but this is something extra. And the Sabbath day, the 7th day, he blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. God's creation is ongoing. I think that's another thing I get out of this first chapter. In the beginning, God, we go through so many beginnings. And I think every time that the Lord stirs us up and gives us a shot of the Spirit or a blast of the Spirit, new life begins for us. And as I said before, I believe we are kept alive by artificial respiration. And however we die, the key thing is we don't breathe anymore. I remember we had a dog up in Maryland. We called her Jazzy because she would look like a Dalmatian, but she wasn't. People said, "Oh no, she's not a Dalmatian." But anyway, she used to drink out of the most homes have a built-in drinking fountain for dogs, and it's called the toilet. This dog used to drink out of our toilet all the time. And this dog died on Christmas Day. I was in there, and she was drinking out of the dog trough, which I called the toilet. But anyway, and she started, and we knew she was very sick. She used to try to go into the backyard and make little places for herself to die alone by herself. And of course, we wouldn't let her do that. Should have just let her do that, I think. But anyway, she took a drink out of the toilet, and then she went, and she never drew a breath back in. I could hear that breath go out. And Kenny was in the kitchen making Christmas dinner. I said, "Kenny, I think she's gone." And so she came in, and sure enough, the dog had died. But it was like the breath went out and nothing came back in because God stopped giving that dog artificial respiration. I think God called the dog home. And so the dog doesn't, because he doesn't get the next breath in. I think that's how we die. So anyway, but when we death, when we don't breathe anymore down here, we're lifted up, right? And in the beginning, God, and we're beginning something new. Death is not the end. We have this in our funeral service, I think. It's not the end of everything. It's the end of life on earth, but it's the beginning of something new and fantastic and glorious. So I think this is the message behind that I get out of chapter 1 of Genesis. Does anybody want to add any comments or questions at this time? Because I think I'm not going to start chapter 2 today. We'll start chapter 2 next time. That's the one with the story of Adam and Eve and the snake and all that kind of thing. More familiar story, I think, but that's an old story in Hebrew tradition. And the first chapter was deliberately constructed by the priests, probably around the time of the exile, which is 530 BC, somewhere in there. 586, they went into exile. They came back in 539. So it was in that time period that the Israelites realized we don't have a temple anymore. We better make sure our traditions are not just handed on from father to son or grandmother to grandkids and that kind of thing around campfires when we're herding our sheep. So there was the scholars that study this stuff, they think that a lot of the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, was written down on manuscripts, of course. I don't know if maybe they had papyrus, but even the manuscripts were sometimes written on goat skin and that kind of thing. You go to Washington, D.C. in the Smithsonian Gallery, there's an old copy, goes back to the 400s of the New Testament, and it's written on goat skin. And you used to be able to go over and see it, but now they don't want put any light on it or anything. So, but I've seen that, and it was fantastic to see how they put it. They write, I don't know what kind of ink they use. It's lasted 1700 years, and but it's right there. But anyway, what you call it, the original copies of the Bible were not books, they were manuscripts, and they would roll them up in scrolls and that kind of thing to preserve it for posterity. That's what they were doing. So I think I'm going to stop here for now. And if there are no questions, I'm going to push a button and I'm going to disappear. I'll look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Not sure, George and Phyllis, whether anybody else has even tuned into this thing. So it was a good Bible study, though. I enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you.
So did we.
Oh, well,
Thank
good.
you, Pastor.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Who was that?
That was Dan and Pat Linen.
Oh, okay, good. Who else is here?
George and Phyllis Holiday.
Okay.
Sherry Ross, Michigan.
In Michigan?
Yep.
Wonderful. Good.
Yeah.
Who else? Anybody else here today? 'Cause I can't see anybody except George and Phyllis. I don't know why your pictures come up. All I see is the top of George's head. Jeez. You got less hair than I do. I got more hair in my face, and so do you. So, who else is here? Anybody else want to call out your name, please? Okay, well, wonderful. I'll see you all next week, and I enjoyed the Bible study. I had no idea what this was going to be like for me because I'm so used to speaking in front of live, people who are not just on a screen. So, anyway, God's blessings to you all. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in
heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be
done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us
this day our
daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and lead us not
forgive those
into
who trespass against us.
And
And lead us not into temptation,
but
but deliver us from evil.
for thine
Thine is the kingdom, and the power,
and
and the glory,
forever and
forever
ever.
and ever.
Amen.
Amen.
In the beginning, God.